Good afternoon. Welcome to the second annual Student Research Symposium of the Illinois Public Health Association. We're so glad to have you all here to learn about the research several of our public health students have done around the state. We'll be recording this presentation and posting it online on the IPHA webpage. And we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot of information to share. Although I should introduce myself, I am Beth Squires. I am the co-chair of the student section, and part of our role in the student section is to provide support to up and coming public health professionals, in the form of students across the state, and we're happy to have them share their research. So I'm going to get my notes here. We have three presenters, speaking today. And our first is Ifeloluwa Adesoye from Western Illinois University, and she is going to be sharing her research. So Ife, if you want to go ahead and share your screen, the platform is yours.
Thank you very much, Beth. So I'm just going to go ahead and share. Okay, so my name is Ifeloluwa Adesoye. I'm quite passionate about reducing the burden of obesity globally. And that is why I carried out this review on the racial incongruity in obesity among adults living in the United States. Let me move to the next slide. Trying to go to the next slide.
Yep, I was gonna say you might want to go to the bottom corner with your mouse, and then there should be a button to press, an arrow.
Other side,
right.
Other side. There we go. There we go.
All right. So I will be presenting with this outlines, and I have my introduction, objectives, methods, and so on. So the objective of this study was to establish that there are racial differences in the prevalence of obesity among adults living in the United States, and also to look into the factors responsible for these various disparities in the among different races in the United States. So since 1970, there has been a continuous rise in the prevalence of obesity in the country, and it has been projected to that about 2030, half of the adults living in the country are going to be obese. And in my opinion, I believe that this requires strategic intervention. It requires urgent attention, and because it's alarming, to say the least. So I conducted the literature review. I used academic websites like PubMed, Embase, and so on. And several studies that met my inclusion criteria were selected. And here are the inclusion criteria. Studies over 2018, peer-reviewed, and so on. So I found out that the non-Hispanic Black adults has the highest prevalence of obesity, and followed by the Hispanic adults and the non-Hispanic white adults. So the non-Hispanic Black adults stood at 38.4%, while the Hispanic adults at 32.6%, and the non-Hispanic white adults at 28.6%. So I'm gonna show you a chloropleth map that depicts a graphical representation of geographical differences among these races in the United States. So the total percentage gave a cutoff point of 35%, which is believed to be the highest burden of obesity. And it was found out that in graph A, just one state had the highest prevalence of obesity in non-Hispanic white adults, just one state in the United States. And in the map B, it was found that, over 38 states, including the District of Columbia, had highest prevalence of obesity in non-Hispanic Black adults, while 8 states had the highest prevalence of obesity in Hispanic adults. So this makes the non-Hispanic Black adults the population that are at risk of obesity, obviously, from the graphical representation. And from this graph, it's showing us the differences in the races and also the gender. So the graph A represents the prevalence in women. So non-Hispanic Black adult women take the lead with the first line, while other races and ethnic groups followed, while the non-Hispanic Black adult men in B take the lead. So these differences in the prevalence of obesity among different races is actually due to, I found that it's due to, social, economic, and environmental disadvantages. So, I found out that the non-Hispanic Black adults, including men and women, they have a lower rate of unemployment, higher rate of high school graduation, and they have a health perception that makes them less likely to diet, which is my first point here. So dieting was less likely in non-Hispanic Blacks compared to the non-Hispanic whites. So they are also less likely to engage in exercises or sign up for exercise programs. And they're also less likely to seek professional help. And they're also less likely to underestimate their weight. So the highest prevalence of obesity has been reported in non-Hispanic Black adults in the United States. And it varies with the races and ethnic groups. And because of this fact, I believe that health professionals, including program planners, policymakers, healthcare professionals themselves, should take into consideration the differences that exist in obesity among different races while planning interventional programs to reduce the burden of obesity. And these are the factors that contribute to the increase in prevalence. The fact that they are less likely to diet, less likely to exercise, less likely to seek help, and their weight perception, which I believe is more of a socio-cultural effect. So, because some people culturally don't believe that overweight or obesity is something you should seek help for, and that this was found to be more prevalent in the non-Hispanic Black adults. So in conclusion, there are racial differences in the prevalence of obesity in the United States. And the highest burden has been demonstrated in the Black community due to social, economic, and environmental disadvantages. It is important that healthcare professionals take this into consideration while planning strategies and interventional programs to reduce the burden of obesity in the country. So here are my references. Thank you.
Great, Ife, thank you. Great job and very interesting. And it's scary to think in just 7 short years, we're gonna hit that 2030 mark. So that the time has passed quickly. So I wanted my first question for you, we have a few minutes for questions, Did you have to do this as part of a class, or did you do this on your own?
I did this on my own.
Oh, very good. Good for you.
Not a
Excellent.
class project.
Very good. So keep up that great work.
Thank you.
And then second, in your research, was there any learning on like why the hesitation to actually seek help? Or like, so in addition, I mean, the sociocultural factors, any more ideas on why, like that like to seek professional help?
Well, I found that they have higher rate of high school, if I may say, dropouts, and higher rate of unemployment. So they are less educated. They're kind of the less educated part of the population. So this kind of, emphasize their cultural beliefs. Because when you have, when the education aspect is more accentuated, it could lower the effect of cultural beliefs. But because, this part of the population is, less educated, we have more cultural beliefs influencing their health-seeking behaviors.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, very good. Any other questions for Ife? Yes, Dr. Killam.
I would like to ask kind of on that topic, because when you have something that's as intransigent as this, particularly in that some behaviors that you were talking about, like unwilling to diet, unwilling to change, do you have any insight or do you know of any research that's been done on their risk perception?
On a risk perception?
Risk perception, which would what is driving this? Do they see it as unimportant? How important does this group think obesity is?
Well, aside the factors that I just mentioned, I currently don't know of any research on risk perception.
Yeah.
But I believe that, which is one of the objectives of this study, to educate people and make health professionals plan programs and more aware of the disparities that exist and why they exist, so that even if it's health education or health program, it will be targeted towards the right population.
Yes, so some targeted intervention, and I think you've done a very good job of describing one place where that can be targeted.
Yeah, I was going to say, there's also, you've uncovered the possibility, if you'd like to further your research in this area, to actually find some populations and drill down even deeper on, why, on that risk perception, where
Yes.
it comes from, and try to how to counteract that. Very good. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, Lainey.
I just wanted to ask you, Ife, why, how you got so interested and passionate about diabetes, and like, is there a reason, or is that just something that you started to study and got interested in organically?
In obesity?
Yeah.
Okay, so well, by profession, I'm a medical doctor prior to going for public health. So over time, I understood that there are several factors that contribute to, the prevalence of obesity, like genetically as well, it does. So that exists in my family. So quite a number of people in my family are quite obese, which is concerning for me. So right at a very young age, I've had to fight for my, health. I've had to keep my weight in check. I've had to do so many things to keep and get enough knowledge about it, because I know if I don't, then this genetic factor will, take over. So I got quite interested while doing my researches, while reading up articles, while dieting and exercising. So it's actually what I want to do, in the long run.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Ife? Very good. Well, thank you. Great job, Ife. Yeah, so, as you can tell, we need continued work on this right now. So definitely, yeah. So thank you. So our next presenter I'd like to welcome is Shelby Brand, and she is a student at University of Illinois, Chicago. So Shelby, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I will share my screen. Let's switch this. There we go. I think it's all set there. Great. So, like Beth said, I'm Shelby Brand. I'm from the University of Illinois, Chicago, and this is self-perception and entry into the job work with my advisor, Tessa Bonney. So for our learning objectives, we're going to look at recognizing labor force participation trends of persons with disabilities, summarize the barriers job seekers and employees with disabilities face, and then describe how self-efficacy of current college students and recent graduates impacts their ability to apply for a job. So it is a well-known fact that persons with disabilities are less likely to be in the labor force than persons without a disability. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 2022, 21.3% of persons with a disability were employed, compared to 65.4% of persons without a disability. This inequity is also seen in the 2022 unemployment rates of 7.6% among persons with a disability and 3.5% among persons without a disability. So this equates to a 2 times the unemployment rate among persons with a disability. Between 2009 and 2022, the labor force participation rate among disabled people has been relatively stagnant within 4%, but the percentage of undergraduate students who reported having a disability has increased from 9.3% in 1999 to 2000 to 19.5% in 2015 to 2016, which is pretty similar to the average, the Americans' disability. There's 20% disabled rate among Americans with disabilities. So there is an apparent inconsistency between the growth of the number of students with disabilities and the unmoving labor force participation rate of people with disabilities, even though equal number of disabled and non-disabled students are graduating college. College students with disabilities can successfully conduct job searches and secure gainful employment when equal access and reasonable accommodations are made available to them by universities and future employers. Unfortunately, persons with disabilities often do not receive the same quality and amount of career counseling as their non-disabled peers to prepare them for the job search process. Additionally, even with laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act, people with disabilities are not employed to their full potential because of underlying discriminatory practices held by employers. The purpose of this study was to examine individuals' experiences, abilities, and self-efficacy when entering the job market and seeking a job. In particular, the study aimed to look at the differences between persons with and without disabilities. So this study is a one-time cross-sectional survey design because it collected data from a population, in this case, being soon to be and recent college graduates at a single point in time. A data collection took place between February 2023 and just concluded recently, and still it's currently April 2023. Eligible participants were asked to complete a 10-minute Qualtrics survey. Study eligibility included English-speaking adults, so 18 years and older, who plan to graduate technical school, college, or university between May 2023 and December 2023, or have already graduated between December 21 and December 2022, so within a 2-year timeframe. All of recruitment was done electronically. Recruitment took place through the University of Illinois Chicago email listservs. a nonprofit online recruitment platform, and the member portal of a professional public health organization, where members were then also able to disseminate the survey within their own organizations. So for the survey, I created a survey using a couple different factors. So self-efficacy was assessed using the 14-item job search efficacy factor of the Career Search Efficacy Scale, which was developed by Scott Solberg, Glenn Good, and Dennis Nord. The Career Search Efficacy Scale scoring assesses an individual's confidence level in performing various tasks outlined in the question. The Job Search Efficacy Subscale specifically covers topics such as identifying employers, dealing with barriers, contacting personnel offices, and finding information about potential employers. Items begin with the phrase, "How confident are you in your ability to?" and are rated on a 10-point Likert scale, from 0 being very little to 9 being very much. The Career Search Efficacy Scale is validated and reliable. Questions about the application search process, interviews, work environment preferences, and disability disclosure were shaped from reoccurring themes I found in the literature based on semi-structured qualitative interviews on the transition to employment and employment experience. The survey also included socio-demographic characteristics, including age, gender identity, race, ethnicity, educational attainment, and disability status. All participants were asked if they self-identify as having a disability or chronic condition. If they responded yes, they were asked a follow-up question. And this question was a modified version of the American Community Survey's question on disability. And then finally, preliminary analysis was conducted using SAS. So for some of my findings, there were a total of 157 respondents as of March 25th, 2023, which is the findings I will be sharing today. Like I mentioned, I did just close the survey, so I will be reanalyzing the data. So some of the final findings may have changed a little bit, as I have, I think, about 100 more respondents now than at the time of analysis. But you can see that a majority of respondents identified as white and or female, and approximately 82% of respondents had already completed a bachelor's or postgraduate degree. These results may be influenced by eligibility screening criteria and the fact that some of the recruitment took place at a large public university. Disability status was more evenly distributed, with 45.2% of respondents identifying as disabled and 54.8% identifying as non-disabled. So to answer the main research question of how do job search efficacy scores differ between people with and without disabilities, I first looked at overall job search efficacy. Overall job search efficacy looked at the mean score for all 14 questions. Although not statistically significant, persons with a disability had a lower mean score of 6 than persons without a disability, who had 6.3. When I looked at each question individually, persons with a disability always had a lower job search efficacy score than persons without a disability, but only 5 were statistically significant, which means that these results were unlikely due to chance. These were: how confident are you in your ability to develop skills you can use across a lifetime of career decision making? How confident are you in your ability to develop skill, to dress in a way that communicates success during a job interview? How confident are you in your ability to know how to relate to your boss in order to enhance your career, which also scored lowest overall? How confident are you in your ability to deal effectively with societal barriers? And how confident are you in your ability to deal effectively with personal barriers? To analyze the relationship between job search efficacy and if a job application hindered an applicant's ability to apply for a job, I stratified job search efficacy into low job search efficacy and high job search efficacy. Among participants who responded yes to the job application hindering their ability to apply for a job, 78% of them had low job search efficacy. So that means I found odds of having low job search efficacy are more than 4 times greater among people who are hindered by the job application process than those who did not report being hindered by the job application process. And when I looked at the job application hindrance response by disability status, you can see that there were almost equal percentage of responses between disabled and non-disabled respondents who said that the application did hinder their ability to apply for the job. However, more non-disabled respondents reported that the job application did not hinder their ability to apply for a job compared to individuals with disabilities. So what do these results mean? Basically, having a lower job search efficacy score translates to a lower confidence level in one's ability to search for a job, including but not limited to the ability to research career options, organize and carry out career goals, communicate with potential employers, address personal and societal barriers, and the ability to achieve a satisfying career. Based on my results, this means that respondents with a disability have a lower confidence level on all fronts when applying for a job and communicating with potential employers. Much of the disability research focuses on barriers to employees with disabilities once they are already employed, but this research shines a light on the barriers persons with a disability may face before they even get through the doors. So analysis allowed us to look at the multiple levels that influence individual behavior to think about future interventions. At an individual level, a lot of these factors are outside the control of individuals, so interventions at the individual level are limited. Based on the 5 job search efficacy scale questions that were statistically significant, I found that universities have a wide range of skill sets that they need to assist students with disabilities to develop. Specifically, universities need to work with students on preparing soft skills for jobs, going beyond the physical items like resumes and cover letters. Additional research is needed to determine what specific aspects of the job application are hindering applicants' abilities to apply for a job. But once that is done, it would be crucial that companies begin to adjust their applications to make them fair and accessible to persons of all abilities. It may be useful as well for employers to go into university settings and interact with students to assist them in reducing student apprehensions when applying for jobs. And as noted, even with laws like the Americans with Disabilities Act, workplace discrimination persists. Employers who do not provide equal access and reasonable accommodations to current and potential employees need to be held accountable. This research will benefit job seekers with disabilities because it will identify if barriers exist when preparing to apply for jobs and within the job application itself. This data allows us to guide universities and employers on system changes that need to be made to provide equal employment opportunities for persons with and without disabilities. Those references. Thank you.
Great job, Shelby. Yeah, thank you. I will say, again, I've talked with Shelby before, and I do have a special place in my heart for people with disabilities. One of my best friends is disabled, as well as I've worked with those with developmental disabilities. So I'm glad this research, is essential. So any questions for Shelby?
I had a question, Shelby. If at any point, I know you're kind of like you said, one of the limitations of your survey was that it was mostly university students. And but I was wondering if you had any thoughts on the generational stigma or like the feelings of like, I feel like younger people, Gen Z, millennials are more upfront about like their disability status, whereas like the sort of Gen X boomer silent generation they kind of put that on the bottom of their list of things that they are. And I didn't know if you thought that had any, I guess, standing in those unemployment numbers or anything like that. If it's self-reported, do you think that there's like a generational kind of gap in the actual data?
Yeah, so that's when I was developing like the questionnaire and deciding on the questions to ask about disability, I met with some colleagues who work in the disability field, and we are really struggling on how do we frame those questions. And I ended up just using the American Community Surveys questions because they exist and they're known and they're used, but I still don't feel like they adequately represent disability. I did say modify because I added one additional question because I just didn't feel like it encompassed disability overall. But yeah, so the idea of self-identified when we're doing these surveys, makes it difficult to determine how accurate these numbers are at times. But I didn't include this in the presentation, but in some of my analysis when I was looking, there was a pretty high percentage of, when I asked about disability disclosure, there was a pretty high percentage of respondents who noted that they were comfortable disclosing their disability, but then the follow-up question was, if you applied or whatever, have you? And that number went way down. So there's a disparity between someone saying they're comfortable and then actually disclosing. Mm-hmm. Whether that's because they don't feel like they need to disclose because they don't believe they need an accommodation, or because they're not comfortable disclosing for another reason. I mean, a survey can't tell us that, but I was kind of taken aback by the huge difference in one's comfortability to disclose and then when actually disclosing. But also to your question, if we look at some of the recent research coming out with, the increase in employees with disabilities, because post-COVID, I feel like that also needs to be looked into further. Is this because we have the same people in the workforce, but those who were not disclosing before are now disclosing because they're more comfortable, or are more people now disabled post-COVID? So where is the variability coming in? So again, with these self-identified surveys, the research, the literature itself is not providing answers, because I feel like just regardless, it's hard to determine this through surveys. Yes, that's my winded answer response.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's actually a good segue for the question I wanted to ask. So if you were able to continue this and delve further, what would be an area that you'd like to explore further?
Yeah, so I think my initial, the reason I kind of went into this was because when looking at these unemployment rates, I think about, is there something that's preventing disabled individuals from getting into the workplace in the first place? Mm-hmm. Which comes down to maybe the application and interview process. That's, they're not even, it's applying for or they start to apply for the job and then they just stop because there's something stopping them. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of would be the next step I'd want to look into. To wonder, if we're seeing, especially when I discovered, we're seeing equal graduation rates between mm-hmm. disabled and non-disabled students. So then why is it not translating to the workforce? So where's the, is it really fully discriminatory practices held by employers that people need to report more? Or is there something else that's preventing it?
Mm-hmm. Oh, very interesting. Yeah, thank you. Any other questions for Shelby? Dr. Killam, you're on mute, Dr. Killam.
That was great. And I have a question, and it's just an anecdotal observation. Do you hear something over and over again that from participants that would say, this would boost my confidence?
This was like so this is like a non-identified survey.
Yeah.
So I have no,
Yeah.
right. There were some open-ended questions that I have yet to analyze because that obviously takes a lot more effort than
Yeah.
some
Or,
of the-
or yes, or possibly even in the academic literature.
right.
That was there something that stood out that would be a lead confidence booster?
Not that's coming to my mind.
Yeah.
Honestly, when I was trying to develop a survey, I was just trying to look for some measure that
Oh, sure. Yeah.
and
And-
self-efficacy and confidence level wasn't even on the top of my radar.
Yeah.
I came across this survey. I honestly don't even remember how. I was honestly looking for surveys that had been used with disabled and employment and stuff. And so, yeah.
And there may not be any.
Right.
There may not be. And I was just curious if you had anything in your back pocket, some insight, but that is something left to be discovered.
Yeah, this was related. I was thinking, I'm trying to troubleshoot, and the health educator in me is like, and what kind of intervention can we do? I'm wondering if just, again, because it's so intimidating. I remember being undergraduate and intimidated about the whole job search process, that universities, again, could provide, just confidence boosting, classes, for everybody, but then target for those, again, and make it relative to, specific audiences too, equally, just because I know I would have benefited from that, just to kind of go in and have confidence to go in and apply for the job, and then how to persevere when you get all these negatives, because that can be challenging, and again, and specifically focus on disabilities. When is it appropriate to disclose, what is wrong, what is illegal, so that they're aware of that. Yeah.
I asked a question too, are you aware of your legal rights as a person with a disability? And a lot aren't, so.
Yeah. So I think that would be helpful. Yeah, that would be tremendously helpful. Yeah. Very good. Any other questions for Shelby? Nope. Well, thank you, Shelby. Great work. Okay. And then our third presenter today is Damilola Oluwemimo. She is another student from Western Illinois University. So I'm trying to think, is it Trojans? Is that is your mascot? I'm trying to remember what the Western Illinois, mascot is. Yeah.
Next.
Bulldogs, right?
Yeah.
Bulldogs, go Bulldogs.
Yeah, it's a bulldog.
Bulldog, yeah, well represented today. So UIC is Flames. Yeah, so Flames. Yeah. So thank you. So Damilola, the platform is yours to share your research.
Okay. Methods. Can you see my screen? Can you see my screen, everybody? Okay.
Yes.
All
Yep, I
right.
can see it. Yeah. We're all muted. We're all
okay.
muted.
Oh, okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad to be able to speak about this here and share my findings with all of you. So basically, before I started my master's program in the United States, I used to think just cooking with charcoal or burning wood is the only form of unclean cooking that we have. But fortunately, I was able to attend the World Health Summit virtually last year, and they were talking about clean cooking, and then they mentioned something about gas stoves. And I was like, we use gas stoves, like more than 50% of households in Nigeria basically use gas stoves, and we use it to some kind of very closed conditions. And the presenter kept talking about all of the health effects, and I decided to dig more into it. So basically this afternoon, I'll be sharing my findings. I'll be explaining how the health effects of gas stove emissions can affect people. We'll be identifying the risk populations and proposing possible mitigation strategies. So the introduction into the study basically means that
Here in the United States, we have over 39% of households that still use gas stoves, and for reasons being convenience, efficiency, affordability, because basically it's way cheaper than using electric stoves, because electric stoves are much more expensive and basically they could shoot up your electricity bill. So people tend to want to use more of gas stoves. And then the next will be that emissions from gas stoves poses a whole lot of risk to human health, especially children. And then also 50 to over 100% of higher nitrogen dioxide levels are present in homes that uses gas stoves much more than electric stoves. Now, hydrogen dioxide are one of the gases that are emitted when we cook with gas stoves in our homes. And the last one being very, very important to me, which is the fact that natural gas, because it's methane, also contributes to climate change. And methane is one of the evil twin of carbon dioxide, the heat maintaining gas that stays in the atmosphere. So it's actually not good at all. So this picture is just a representation of all the gases that are emitted when we cook with gas stoves. So you can see that within this perimeter, we can see where the gases are emitted from the gas stoves, and then they remain inside the house, and also they could also go outside and also cause outdoor air pollution. Now, I am just going to briefly explain what some of these gases do and how they affect our health. So the first one basically is the dioxide, which is 10 parts per billion. Now, 10 parts per billion basically means just trying to drop, just a drop in an ocean. It's a whole lot, right? But then when we have, as small as it is, EPA standards tells us that we should not stay around what we have that measure for more than 1 hour. And this later in this study, I'll be showing you how some households have had the measures higher than this. So, and then when people inhale nitrogen dioxide, which could also be called NOx, they tend to have irritants get into their mucus, their eyes and nose, shortness of breath, fatigue, etc. And then the next one is carbon monoxide. I call this one a silent killer because basically it's colorless and odorless. People could actually inhale it and confuse the symptoms for food poisoning or flu, because the symptoms could be headache, dizziness, fatigue in people that are very, very strong, and etc. And then the last one is the particulate matter. So we have this one in two ways. We have the particulate matter 2.5 and the matter 0.1. Now for the matter 2.5 is just a little bit shorter than one strand of hair. And when people inhale it, it clogs the lungs and could lead to a whole lot of lung problems such as emphysema. And then the second one is the 0.1. This one is actually the deadliest, and it's because it's very tiny. When people inhale it, it gets into the bloodstream through the lungs and circulates all around the body. And for both the 2.5 and the 0.1 can actually be emitted in wood. When people burn wood and inhale all of this smoke, it usually contains particulate matter. And on the extreme side of it, it causes decreased lung growth in children. Basically, it could lead to preterm birth and infant mortality. So this very interesting study was a cohort study that was done in California for children. And it basically just shows the relationship between the emissions of nitrogen dioxide for people that cook with gas stoves. And the particularly interesting thing about the study was because it was done for a long years. So most of the time, when I try to talk about this to people, they say, we've been using gas stoves all our lives and we do not have all of these symptoms. So why are you so sure that it causes this? So this study is a perfect representation of that. It showed how nitrogen dioxide have increased in homes of people that uses gas stoves. And then when people began to take it out of their houses, they noticed that there was a very strong decline in nitrogen dioxide gases in their homes. There was another part of the study that also indicated the relationship between nitrogen dioxide with asthma, but because of the time frame and everything for the slides, I couldn't include that in here. And then this picture basically shows the guidelines that we have for nitrogen dioxide, both here in the United States, in Canada, and generally the WHO guidelines. But the bad thing is, in the United States, we do not have an indoor guidelines for nitrogen dioxide, but we only use the outdoor guidelines for our indoor guidelines. But in Canada and the WHO generally, they have the indoor guidelines, which is also between 90 to 106 parts per billion for 1 hour average. So that means when you spend time in an environment where you have nitrogen dioxide and you spend more than 1 hour there, and the measure is higher than 100, you are at risk of being affected. So you can see that the standards of Canada and California, with the standards of Canada being the shortest actually, which is 60. And then this table here shows how nitrogen dioxide are emitted in our houses when we do basic cooking. When we bake in the oven, we could have up to 230. When we roast meat in the oven, we could have up to 296, which is very, very high. And another thing that I discovered that was that when we pan fry foods, it could be high as 300. So pan frying using gas stoves could actually be very, very detrimental to our health. And basically, we have the at-risk populations. That means people that are much more affected. And we have children. I'll be expatiating more on this later. We have elderly. Elderly could be people that have, underlying diseases. Then we have people that live with obesity. We have people that live with diabetes, and then people with pre-existing heart and lung conditions. Now, for people that live in low socioeconomic status, they're much more prone to using gas stoves because it is much more easier, it's affordable for them to use. And most of the time, people that live in low socioeconomic status tend to live in very small houses with a whole lot of people. They tend to live in older houses, and they are less prone to benefiting from government policies that, that could make maybe their landlords or their landlady change some of these appliances. So most of the time they use very old gas stoves appliances that do not have ventilation and all of those things. So it poses more risk to their health. And then for kids, basically the reason why air pollution affects them more is because they have higher breathing rates. When they run around and play and all of that, they tend to breathe much more faster. And then they have higher lung surface to body ratios. So that means when they move around, all of these gases could easily diffuse within their system. And then the last one being that they have immature respiratory and immune system. So their immune system is still very weak and they do not have enough antibodies to fight against all of these gases and chemicals. So basically this picture is just to let us understand how detrimental it can be for kids to live in a very, very bad indoor air pollution situation. So 42% of kids have increased risk of asthma when they live in conditions like this, and 24% are also they tend to be diagnosed with asthma later on when they live in this kind of conditions and breathing all of this dangerous gases. They could have irritated airways, they could have wheezing, cardiovascular effects, or even decreased IQ abilities. And I decided to include this in this study because it is particularly special to me. I lived in a neighborhood whereby people still cook in this kind of conditions. And I know that when we were young, my mom used to say, try to stay away from when you see people cooking with wood, just try to stay away. I know she might not be aware that, they emit all of these gases, particularly matter and all the likes, but she's just saying it because she feels that smoke is bad and all of that. I just hope that when we take advocacy to the next level as public health professionals, we could also take it to the low-income countries, because they do not understand the effects of all of these things, and majority of them still cook in these unclean ways. And when some of them can even still afford to get gas stoves to cook with, they still do not understand that even that is detrimental. So it will be very, very good for us to take advocacy to that level. So now I've explained all of this, and it's bad news, obviously, but thank God we have solutions, or not necessarily solutions, but at least mitigation strategies that we could use to help ourselves and our families and even the next generation. So the first one would be to have very good ventilation items, and those are the range hood that are usually above the stoves that we use to cook. And in one of the studies that I checked, they also indicated that when you cook on the burner that's outside, that's towards you, the gases tend to go more inside the house than they would go out through the ventilator. So it is usually best to use the burners behind than the ones that are very close to you. And then most of the time, even how I do it most of the time, even though I don't use a gas stove in my house, but we usually forget to turn on the range hood when we cook. And it's actually very, very important because it makes all of these gases go out and takes them out of the house, even though that's not perfect because they also cause outdoor air pollution, but then it's still something that people can actually use to mitigate the effects. And then the perfect solution would have been to get an electric stove or an induction stove, as the case may be. But the issue with this most of the time has been that people have been complaining that when you use electric stoves, it shoots up your electricity bill, and besides, electric stoves are much more expensive. But I would say it's better to pay for your health. It's just a deficit that you're doing to help your health, to help you live better. So it's actually a perfect solution to staying away from gas stoves and fossil fuels generally. And the most important one, which is the last, is advocacy. So we could see here that IPHA is the first national public health organization to pass a policy statement declaring that gas stove emissions are a public health concern. So advocacy could actually do a whole lot for us here, because when people that cannot afford to electrify their homes, or they do not live in houses that they could just stand up on their own to say, oh, I want to change up my stove, advocacy could help them. Advocacy could speak for them. And I want to quickly chip in this also, that most of the time as public health professionals, when we do research and we learn about all of these things and we go out there to educate people, we are so fixated on the idea that we are educating people, and we usually don't try to incorporate interdisciplinary approach to advocacy, because there are some people that are benefiting from selling these gas stoves to people. There are some people that are benefiting from the policy of still maintaining the use of fossil fuels. So when we do advocacy from an interdisciplinary approach, it will help to implement all of these policies faster and help people that are living in the low socioeconomic status. Thank you so much. That's it for me today. And these are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Damilola. Thank you. Great. Now I really want to see if I can get better ventilation when I'm cooking with my gas stove. so one of the things when I've taught environmental health, I notice we need to do better on educating on the indoor air pollution for people, because I've also done work in radon, and a lot of people aren't aware of the exposure to radon and the risk involved in that. So this is another emphasis that we need to be more aware of as a population, of the risk in indoor air pollution. And of course, then all of the efficiency windows that,
Exactly.
again, there's not, and air conditioning systems, again, we're getting that more of that exposure.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, I know when I taught environmental health, I would make my students very scared to go outside.
Yeah, exactly. It's
because, just one of those things to be aware of.
Yeah.
So thank you. So any questions for Damilola?
It's not a question so much as I'm currently taking, I'm in the Division of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences. So we learn a lot about, and we have 2 professors working on this. So if you want your PhD, I don't know if you're getting, UIC is doing a lot of research on gas stoves right now. If you want connections, but
yeah, thank you so much for that.
Yeah,
Good
but,
networking. This is at network. You got to engage. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. Good example of that.
Yeah.
but so I'm in like an environment toxicology and disease class right now, and I really liked how you brought in the point of children and like their lung size and the capacity and stuff, because I think like we forget about that, and I think like we know like things are more harmful to children than
Yes.
adults.
Mhm.
But I thought that the way you put like the picture there, it was just and the way you explain it was a good like presentation of kind of understanding like the increased harm to children that sometimes we like don't think as much about.
Yeah, exactly. Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Shelby.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Damilola?
I just want to, what I want to say is not, hi everyone, I'm sorry, my
That's
name is
okay.
Precious. So that was a very beautiful presentation, and I just want to say keep it up. And I know that there are some communities in part of Africa and Asia, and their condition, especially when it comes to cooking, is very, very poor. So I want to encourage you to keep doing this, to keep disseminating the research. Then probably we might have some foundations that might want to support those communities and help them to develop better and use, because most of them don't wish to be in that kind of situation, but they are poor, and that is why they have to do that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Precious.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. I would like to especially thank IPHA, Shelby, and Damilola for sharing their research and putting together. I know it took a lot of time to format and put that together, and so thank you. And definitely add this to your resume. So that's this presentation as you continue on. Okay, I muted. Okay, and so, but this was all very informative, and I love the spread, the differences in research. There's, again, thank you for showing that. There's lots of ways to complete research. There's lots of topics on research. So find something that's a passion of yours. So our next set of presentations is next Wednesday, April 26th. So please come back if you can. I'll be sharing that link that morning. But thank you all very much. For those of you still in school, good luck with the rest of your semester. I hope it continues to go well. Congratulations to those who are graduating. And so hopefully you're celebrating with family and friends, and just have a wonderful week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting it. It's really great.
Yeah, it is. It really is. I really enjoy it. Yeah. Have a great day.
Bye for now.
Bye.